Morning, everyone. Justin Trudeau's reporting yesterday, April 4th. Today is April 5th. Canada to receive millions of masks from China, Trudeau says. Canada is set to receive millions of medical masks from China, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau announced on Saturday. Trudeau made the comments from Rideau College, where he is currently self-isolating. Isn't this day 23 of his 14-day isolation? Yeah, weird, right? Isn't that strange? Back to this. According to Trudeau, in the next 48 hours, Canada will be receiving a shipment of millions of masks by chartered cargo flight from China. Oh, and this is reported on March 30th, so this is kind of concerning to me. From the BBC, countries reject Chinese-made equipment. Thousands of testing kits and medical masks are below standard or defective, according to authorities in Spain, Turkey, and the Netherlands. On Saturday, the Dutch Health Ministry announced that it had recalled 600,000 face masks. The equipment had arrived from a Chinese manufacturer on 21 March and had already been distributed to frontline medical teams. Dutch officials said that the masks did not fit and that their filters did not work as intended, even though they had a quality certificate. The rest of the shipment was immediately put on hold and has not been distributed, a statement read. Now it has been decided not to use any of this shipment. Spain's government encountered similar problems with testing kits ordered from a Chinese company. It announced that it had bought hundreds of thousands of tests to combat the virus, but revealed in the following days that nearly 60,000 could not accurately determine if a patient had the virus. And I reported on that at the time, but there's a bunch more. And I just read that article. I'll just use the headlines for this. Australia seized faulty coronavirus protective equipment imported from China. Here's one from Irish Times. Some protective equipment from China, not ideal, HSE says. I think that's their health service. And here is what it says. Chinese QA inspector rubs China-made masks on his shoe. This is beyond just negligence. It's contemptuous and willful intent to cause harm to us. No more healthcare imports from China or India. And, well, here we go. Have a watch. And I don't know how to verify that. That's a video that I've seen among hundreds of videos that I've seen of things supposedly out of China. So take that with a grain of salt. But it seems there are a lot of countries rejecting Chinese manufactured goods because they're faulty, because they don't work, or they're not what they said. And so Doug Ford yesterday during his presser said this.
Never again in the history of Canada should we ever be beholden to companies around the world or countries around the world for the safety and well-being of the people of Canada. We have the technology, we have the ingenuity, we have the engineering might, the manufacturing might. There's nothing we can't build right here in Ontario. And I also mentioned, as we get these companies ramped up and we get through this, we can't be going over to other sources because we're going to save a nickel. Because we might be small in population compared to other countries, but we're giants when it comes to technology, manufacturing, ingenuity, engineering. As I always say, we can build anything. And as
I'll leave him there. So isn't that a stark contrast? That's the Premier of Ontario and Trump derangement syndrome kind of copycat, right? Everybody hates Doug Ford, except that I've seen people kind of turning on this and saying, yeah, he's done a good job handling this crisis. I think that he's done a good job. I said at the beginning of this, he was going to act before Trudeau act. Trudeau still has not stopped flights from coming in from infected areas. What could possibly be the excuse for that? There's no economic excuse for that now. There's no reason to continue landing international flights. People aren't traveling on vacation. People aren't traveling to Canada for fun. It's irresponsible. And so the contrast is this: Canada to receive millions of masks from China, Justin Trudeau says. And despite the fact that a lot of the equipment that we're seeing being delivered from Chinese manufacturers is faulty. And Doug Ford says, never, ever again are we going to be reliant on foreign companies or foreign countries for needed medical equipment for the safety of Canadians. And I mean, I think that's what leadership looks like, right? There is a pathway out of this, and when we get out of this, we're not going to make this mistake again. That's leadership. Not, we're going to get some masks from China. Oh, other countries are having problems with masks from China. We're still going to get masks from China. Can we get 2 million? Yes, great. And I'm not saying that No, I think we should be choosy about where we get our masks from at this point in time. Who knows what this virus is? And who knows why it was released and how it was released? And who knows why we're continuing to land flights here? But it's really disappointing to see the lack of leadership on the federal level. Really disappointing. This was an interesting article. Moving on from all of that. This was an interesting, well, not from all of that, but this is an interesting article. CP24 trying to do cover. Yesterday, I was talking about how underqualified Miss Hajdu is to be the Minister of Health. She's not a medical doctor, and she doesn't really have a lot of experience with, well, any of this, right? An epidemiologist, somebody who studies diseases, somebody who studies, how infectious diseases work. That might be more appropriate, right? But no, we've got Miss Hajdu. And oh my goodness, this was a little bit of fun. Okay, here we go. Hajdu brings anthropology, public health experience to COVID-19 fight. Patty Hajdu fell in love with cultural anthropology at university. Now, as Canada's federal health minister, in the midst of the COVID-19 pandemic, she's playing a leading role in an existential battle against a virus that promises to change the course of human societies around the globe, the very thing cultural anthropologists spend their lives studying. Quote, "There's a piece of me that's still an anthropologist at heart, if you will," Hajdu said in an interview. And I scroll down a little bit. Hajdu also has a background in public health, having worked for 9 years on the Substance Abuse and Injury Prevention Program for the Thunder Bay District Public Health Unit, including spearheading the Northern Cities drug strategy. Her education and experience in public health before entering politics in 2015 would seem to uniquely position the silver-haired 53-year-old for the lead role she's playing now in the COVID-19 crisis. Yet she frankly admits nothing prepared her for this. Again, this is positioning. This is trying to show that she's got chops for this, right? Oh, she's very experienced. She should definitely be leading the country's response to this unprecedented event. You see what I'm saying? Okay, back to this. I scroll down a little bit. When she first started at Thunder Bay's public health unit in her early 30s, she recalls the emphasis on pandemic preparedness and conversations with the unit's epidemiologist, who kept warning that the globe was due for the big one. I was like, oh yeah, okay, fine. Because there's an arrogance to humanity that we couldn't possibly be taken to our knees by a virus. Like we know so much more than they knew 100 years ago, right? And here we are. Okay, so quick question, pop quiz. Do you want the person who was in her early 30s questioning the epidemiologist? She wasn't able to hold that role in the Thunder Bay's public health unit, right? She was talking to somebody else who clearly knew what he was talking about, and she dismissed him. Do you want that person being the health minister, or just this random epidemiologist, this guy here that she was talking to? I would take him. Or her, whoever he, she, whatever, it doesn't matter. That person would probably do a better job than Miss Hajdu's doing, right? Isn't it so funny? She's so dismissive. Oh, it couldn't possibly happen. Unbelievable. Back to this. Liberal insiders are relieved to have Hajdu at Health Canada's helm during the crisis. She's widely perceived as one of the government's best communicators. Smart and knowledgeable, but plain spoken. Okay, I'll just go back up. I was like, oh yeah, okay, fine. Best communicator in the government, everyone. I mean, at least she doesn't dress up, right? At least she doesn't, right? Anyway, unbelievable. Okay, back to this. Liberal insiders, blah, blah, blah. Best communicators, smart and knowledgeable, but plain spoken. Someone who can deliver tough messages in a calm, down-to-earth way while still managing to convey compassion for people who are fearful or suffering, as she did when she choked up a couple of weeks ago, as she urged Canadians to be kind to one another. Ah, yes. And do you remember that time when the reporter asked about China's numbers? The easily provable. On April 1st, U.S. intelligence said China concealed the extent of virus outbreak. And this took place on April 2nd, I believe. Yes, April 2nd. And remember when the reporter asked, and Ms. Hajdu said this, basically, China, there's no indication that China falsified their numbers, and then told the reporter that he was propagating conspiracy theories? Do you remember that? Oh, I do, and I'll show you because, well, here it is.
There's no indication that the data that came out of China in terms of their infection rate and their death rate was falsified in any way. In fact, if you look at the death rate overall in China, it's much higher than the one we're seeing now. And so we rely on the World Health Organization to do this important work because, of course, we're all in this together. And I think one of the most important things to understand about this pandemic, this global pandemic, is that as long as coronavirus exists in one country, it exists in all of our countries.
This is a talking point that these guys like to push. This virus knows no borders. It's going to be everywhere. Oh my goodness. You're forgetting that you're in charge of our country. You're using our tax dollars to deal with this virus in our country. You get it? I don't think she does. And it's really frustrating because she behaves as though it's Canada's responsibility to eradicate the virus around the world. It's not. That's impossible. We couldn't do that even if we wanted to. Just like we couldn't meaningfully change the CO2 levels in the world because China creates a new Canada every 4 months, I think. And that might be high, might be weeks with regard to fuel and CO2 use, right? So let's carbon tax it, man. Let's just tax people more. Can you still afford your house? Then you can afford a tax, right? Here we go. I'm gonna cue up the part where she tells him that he's buying into conspiracy theories. Hold on. Okay, it's hard to hear the reporter's question. He kind of interrupts her and he says, "How can you say that when it's clear that China's been falsifying their data?" And he pushes back with facts, but you can't hear it properly. But I'm gonna play it, and then you can hear her call him a conspiracy theorist. Very clear, very top-notch communicator, smart as a whip. Right to it, right? You conspiracy theorist, you. You're probably a white supremacist too. You vote for Bernier?
Let her finish. No. Ian.
So I would say that your question is feeding into the conspiracy theories that many people have been perpetuating on the internet. And it's important to remember that there is no way to beat a global pandemic if we're actually not willing to work together as a globe.
Right, but if China has sick people and sick people don't know that they're sick and they get on planes and they fly to Canada, and then those sick people who don't know they're sick self-quarantine and get sick, that is still another sick person in Canada, still more potential contagion, still more potential contact. It's irresponsible. We're not doing the basics to begin to keep people safe, right? It doesn't make any kind of sense at all. Remember the time that Miss Hajdu approved a $1.1 million spend for her new ministerial office in 2016? Yep, I remember that too. Okay, hold on, here it is. She's, a top-notch communicator, right? Best communicator, smart and knowledgeable, plain spoken. Someone who can deliver tough messages, you conspiracy theorist, in a calm, down-to-earth way while still managing to convey compassion for the people who are fearful or suffering. Right, I scroll down. Hajdu gained her early life experience at the School of Hard Knocks. She and her brother were raised by an aunt and uncle in Minnesota during the early years. Does she have American citizenship? She eventually moved back to Thunder Bay to be with her mother, but left home at just 16. She declines to go into detail other than to say it was a difficult story. Here is her mother responding. This is in 2018. I fail to understand how a newspaper could print such slanderous articles as was plastered all over the front page of Monday's local newspaper. Hajdu fears life's traumas. CJ, February 12th. This is, again, 2018. I believe 2018. Does your editor think Miss Hajdu's words are truthful because of her status in government? Would it not be fair prior to printing such a subjective and personal article to speak to members of Miss Hajdu's family, especially her mom? I am the person mentioned in the article whose reputation is being blackened, the one with supposed mental health problems, but to whom she entrusted her children every day with no remuneration so that she could freely pursue her career and education. She left home of her own volition at age 16 because her mother refused to pick up her boyfriend's mess. Your article was biased and distorted. I am shamed that our community should be subject to articles of such damning and injurious lies, and I assure you that this will go no further. I have kept my silence for far too long in order to protect my grandchildren, but they are grown men now, and the silence has been broken. And this is a Thunder Bay Facebook thing. Interesting things written here. I'll let you check it out. But it paints a very different story than the one being painted in this article, right? After heading up Thunder Bay's drug strategy, Hajdu took on the job of running Shelter House, a homeless shelter, which was employing the kinds of harm reduction practices she had been advocating. And this is just an interesting piece. They don't tell you that Patty's final year of university was paid for using Shelter House funds approved by the board of directors. They don't tell you that Patty sat in her office getting paid to do schoolwork. They don't tell you that Patty liked to spend. They don't tell you about the people who had personality conflicts with Patty getting fired by her and the expensive payout packages, lots of money wasted under Patty's command. So, it paints, and obviously this is a private person. I don't know. I can't verify the validity of these claims. But it's interesting when people like Patty's mom write articles to the editor talking about the lies and misinformation Interesting when things get filled in a little bit, right, with firsthand information. And interesting that they're trying to sell Miss Hajdu as somebody who's very experienced when she clearly isn't. Here it is. So Shelter House. And I mean, when you look at the evidence and you hear what Miss Hajdu says, right? You're propagating conspiracy theorists. There are some good questions to be asked. And this, 15 minutes. Okay, so this is Candace Malcolm. She heads up True North News, and she writes for the Toronto Sun sometimes. And she says, why is Canada's health minister backing up China's lies? And we'll just get to the meat of it here. This was a remarkable moment. A top member of Trudeau's inner circle was ardently defending a communist regime known for grave human rights abuses and lying on the world stage, while tacitly accusing our top ally and most important international partner of spreading false information. To add insult to injury, when Brown tried to push back with facts, Hajdu lashed out at him, accusing the reporter of feeding into conspiracy theories. That was the clip we just watched. Not only was this an autocratic response to a very reasonable question, making the minister look more like a Chinese official than an elected civil servant in a liberal democracy, but Hajdu's comments are also highly ignorant and in contradiction to the known facts. There have been plenty of indications that the data coming out of China is false, starting with the fact that China has admitted so much. In mid-February, China was widely criticizing for not including individuals who tested positive for coronavirus, but were not showing symptoms in official tallies. Last week, Chinese government finally changed course to include asymptomatic cases, marking the 8th different definition of what constitutes a coronavirus infection in China's official reporting since the outbreak began in late 2019. Yeah, they changed the reporting all the time in the early days, right? It was insane. Back to this. On March 11th, a Southampton University study found that had China acted just 1 or 2 or 3 weeks sooner, cases could have been reduced by 66, 86, and 95% respectively, significantly limiting the geographical spread of the disease. Instead, China spent the early days arresting doctors and journalists who spoke out about the deadly virus while adamantly denying human-to-human transmission. While there is no free press in China, and the communist regime expelled American journalists on March 17th, there have been some independent reports calling China's numbers into suspicion. And there's more, but do you really want a health minister who, in spite of the facts, smartly...
Your question is...
smartly and clearly articulates stuff like this to reporters who are asking questions, legitimate questions, questions with facts and weighted facts. Our biggest ally, part of Five Eyes, the backbone of the Five Eyes international spying network, right? They're saying they've concealed the extent of the virus. They lied about it. And instead of backing that up, she's pushing the CCP talking points, right? The Chinese Communist Party.
Your question is feeding into the conspiracy theories that many people have been perpetuating on the internet, and it's important to remember.
Yes, it's important to remember that, well, I mean, the internet's kind of forever, right? So it doesn't take much to see that you're not telling the truth. It doesn't take much. What would it take for truth out of this government? What would it take for the most common sense action out of this government? We're not there yet, apparently. We're not there yet. But we'll shut down the economy. I don't know. Thanks for watching, everybody. Check out CanadaPoly.com. Check out CanadaReport.co. And have a wonderful, wonderful day. Wash your hands.